2025.
I think we have to leave it there by the Trump team.
All right.
So leave it. That is the last word. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
They've been telling us.
Thank you.
Yesterday, convicted felon Donald Trump publicly boasted that he crushed his historically disastrous interview with the National Association of Black Journalists, which was so bad that Trump's own team, his own handlers, abruptly and awkwardly ended the interview halfway through. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. No doubt you have heard and perhaps have seen clips of, again, this historically disastrous conversation between Donald Trump and the National Association of Black Journalists. But somebody should tell Trump that, because he is rewriting history in real time. He said on Truth Social, he said, "The questions were rude and nasty, often in the form of a statement, but we crushed it," all caps. Well, if you have not seen the clips or the exchanges, we're going to pack through some of them or unpack some of them. But first, we're going to skip to the end because this is important. Donald Trump was supposed to speak for an hour, and 35 minutes in, his own team, his own handlers said, "Nope, cut it. We're done. We got to get out of here. We got to get out of here." And it awkwardly happened in real time.
Remember, they're taking your jobs. These people coming in are taking your jobs.
Project 2025.
I think we have to leave it there by the Trump team.
All right.
So leave it. That is the last word. Thank you so much, Mr. Trump, for coming today and joining us.
Well, thank you very much.
They've been telling us.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, very much. Great honor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
NABJ will email about details regarding the conversation with Vice President Kamala.
So, again, that's how bad it was that Donald Trump, who, listen, and this is something that his followers apparently like about him, that he'll have any conversation. He won't speak coherently. He won't address questions substantively. He lies through his teeth pathologically. But they say, listen, he's fearless. He's brave. He tells it like it is. And yet this interview went so bad for a guy who disastrously performs in interviews that they cut it halfway through. What a tacit concession that this thing went so badly for Donald Trump. So with that in mind, we're actually going to play some of the so-called hits, the greatest hits of, again, this historically disastrous interview, starting with the very beginning. So Trump sits down. Actually, I will say the journalist here, who I believe is Rachel Scott, she noticed at the end, so she's the one basically to relay the information from the Trump campaign that, hey, we have to cut this interview. Your team is demanding that we cut this interview prematurely. Notice how she addresses him as Mr. Trump. Now, I don't know if this was deliberate, but I like to think that it was. She refused to address him as Mr. President, the way that Harris Faulkner, a Fox propagandist who was also on stage asking Trump questions, she was off screen at the time, she referred to Trump as Mr. President. I hope that Rachel Scott did this purposefully, because Donald Trump does not deserve that respect in the title, especially because so often MAGA Republicans and Fox propagandists don't refer to the current president, the sitting president, the real president, Joe Biden, that way. So I love the casual disrespect there. Let's get to the first question, though. So Trump sits down, and I guess I don't know what the hell he was expecting. He should have been expecting tough questions, which these journalists were perfectly entitled to ask him. And right out the gate, he is asked a perfectly fair, tough question about things that he has said and done in the past, and he does not handle it well. First question, first answer.
Your time. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country.
So yeah, that was the first question. Perfectly fair. Was it tough? Sure. But Donald Trump said and did all of those things. So it's fair game. And I don't know what the hell he was expecting. I also want to point out, again, right out the gate, his sensitivity, his fragility. Donald Trump is the biggest bully in American politics, certainly in modern U.S. history. He presides over the greatest, and I mean in terms of size and influence, the greatest movement of political bullies in American history. Think of what MAGA Republicans who are in office, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, Mike Johnson, what all of these people have said about people who disagree with them, what Trump has said about people who disagree with him, about women, marginalized groups, minorities, liberals, progressives, the LGBTQ community, the press, whoever. And he is clutching his pearls and crying that he felt that he was treated with insufficient respect. Like you don't give me any platitudes. You don't observe the niceties. Well, hey, you don't either. So why is it that you can dish it out, but you can't handle it? And by the way, she did comport herself professionally. She didn't like sucker punch you in the ribs. She didn't spit in your face. You guys sat down on a stage for an interview you agreed to have for a full hour, by the way, and then you cut it halfway through. And she asked you a perfectly fair question about things you've said in the past. So I just love the hypocrisy, the fragility that animates the MAGA movement. There are no bigger snowflakes in this world than MAGA Republicans. Another clip.
Then we'll move on to other questions here. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a
literally
definition
the words
then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition.
Sir,
of
I'm
that.
asking you a question, a very direct question.
Define it for me, if you
I
would.
just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a Black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she Black?
She is always...
Yeah, so again, that's what a staggeringly stupid performance. Number one, note what he tries to do, because Donald Trump can't address questions substantively. He's a genuinely stupid man, particularly with respect to politics. People want to make fun of President Bush, as did I, for his misspeakings, the Bushisms, right? You know, when he would say, fool me once, shame on. Now, see, I'm doing a Trump impression there. It's all like reflex. But when President Bush would famously like screw up adages and idioms and things like that, even President Bush could answer questions or deal with questions much more substantively than Donald Trump ever could, and certainly can right now. So when he's asked a question about things he said in the past, he probably, maybe he did forget what DEI stood for, right? Even though he runs his mouth about DEI all the time. So he stalls for time. He tries to flip it. Define DEI. And she does. She gives him, what the initialism stands for. Well, no, define it. I just did. Define it. And again, to her credit, whereas a lot of reporters, I think, would be bullied by Donald Trump, she doesn't back down. And she's like, no, I asked you a question. I gave you what DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what about this? And so then he's finally forced to answer, and then he answers horribly. The fact of the matter is that Vice President Harris comes from a multi-ethnic, multiracial background, and this is not particularly complicated, right? She comes from Indian descent and Black descent as well. She's a Black woman. So again, the deliberate obfuscation and the choice of language, she just decided to become Black, is ahistoric, wildly unprofessional, and it's also going to turn off moderate voters as well that Trump desperately needs to court. A couple of other clips.
So Sadia Massey, someone from Illinois, an unarmed Black woman, was shot the other day in her home by a deputy sheriff. The deputy has since been charged with murder. You've said police would get immunity from prosecution if you win. Why should someone like that officer have immunity, in your opinion?
Immunity?
Immunity.
I don't know the exact case, but I saw something, and it didn't look good to me. It didn't look good to me. Are you talking with the water, right?
Yeah, well, police unions are not backing this person either.
Okay.
But again, why would...
They're going to be charging the officer. I guess they're charging the officer.
So why should he receive immunity?
Well, he might not. I mean, it depends. It depends on what.
So again, Trump is awkward here because Trump has advocated for police officers not only to have qualified immunity, which I would argue is bad enough. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, yes, it's a high risk job, but the fact if you engage unprofessionally, if you break the law, then you should be liable for civil consequences, right? But Trump wants to take it from qualified immunity, which I would argue is bad enough, and he wants to give cops absolute immunity, every police officer in the country. If you're on this channel, you know how I feel about absolute immunity. That's insane. No person in this country should be given absolute blanket immunity for anything they do. President of the United States, judge, Supreme Court justice, police officer, senator, whatever. Targeted, specified immunity for certain things like the speech and debate clause in the Constitution, which grants certain immunities for Congress people and senators. I understand that. I even understand, as much as controversial as this is, why the Department of Justice doesn't prosecute sitting presidents. I understand the logic behind some of this, but absolute blanket immunity? No, that's ridiculous. And so he's tripped over his own words. Like, hey, you want to give every cop in this country blanket immunity, but here's an example of a police officer. We have the footage. It was horrifying, and it's so bad that even police unions are walking away from this person. They don't condone what he did, which to me is just the ultimate indictment. And by your logic, Donald, you would grant this person absolute immunity for shooting a woman inside her home. She was the one who called the police and asked for help in the first place. What about that? And you can tell that he is really fumbling this because he just doesn't know what to do. Maybe then don't advocate for giving sweeping immunity to any person in this country, including police officers. Food for thought. He's also asked about J.D. Vance's recent comments as well.
And to Rachel's point, he, has a lot of opinions about childless women like myself or divorced people like yourself. Do you think, well, my point is here.
But at least it was said in a friendly manner.
My point is, do you think the Republican Party is getting a little bit too judgy about people's lives when you think about abortion or when you think about what J.D. Vance is saying?
I don't think, look, I think that the Democrat Party is really the one that has the problem. I think they're radical on abortion because they're allowing abortion in the 9th month. They're allowing the death.
But I think it's
they're
about
allowing
freedom,
the death of a baby after the baby is born, based on.
So there again, just absolute dishonesty coming from Donald Trump. And again, a refusal to engage with the question. I love the fact how she hit him with his own hypocrisy there too, that, Donald Trump is a divorcee. Donald Trump is somebody who, by J.D. Vance's own logic, is a second-class citizen. I mean, the horrible comments that J.D. Vance has made about childless people in this country, divorcees, single people, it's really gross and it turns people off. And Trump is struggling with this. There was a clip too, which I deleted, or I accidentally closed out of, where Trump said to everyone in attendance that, historically the vice president doesn't matter all that much. So here he is basically saying, yeah, this guy I picked, who's supposedly the heir apparent to MAGA, yeah, he doesn't matter all that much, so you can ignore what he says. I mean, imagine being J.D. Vance and the tears that he wept, seeing his boss and his cult leader, the person for whom JD sacrificed all principle and integrity. Because JD Vance had, the merit of Donald Trump back in 2015. He recognized Donald Trump for what he was and what he is and what he always will be, which is this profoundly stupid, malignant narcissist who is sexist and racist and xenophobic and just all the worst things. But then J.D. Vance sacrificed all that for the sake of political expediency. And then in turn, Trump is throwing J.D. Vance under the bus like, hey, this guy's a freaking loser who doesn't matter all that much. So funny. Folks, again, this interview lasted 35 minutes. There are many moments in which Trump returns to insult Rachel Scott and others as well. Harris Faulkner does her best on the Fox Propaganda Network. She's the third journalist. Again, she was not in any of these clips where she tries to foist praise on Trump and really grade him on a curve. And we'll probably get into her reaction on the Fox Propaganda Network to all this. But yes, this was so historically bad that Trump's team, which they are gluttons for punishment, right, ended the damn interview halfway through and basically yanked him off stage with one of those like vaudeville canes that you see in the classic movies where the performer goes on too far and they're yanked off screen. That happened to Donald Trump. That's how bad he did. He did not crush it. The only thing he may have crushed is his own campaign. Let me know what you think in the comments.